Rule number one is business as usual on day one. Don't break the business. Don't make the drivers freak out. Communication is key, what you communicate to the drivers so that they know what they are expecting. Even if there's nothing changing.
Today, our guest is Jen VrMeer, Senior Manager of Sales Operations at BD.
This business, we move fast. We are constantly integrating, divesting, changing. Everyone tends to focus more on integration.
Yeah.
Very rarely you hear people talking about that divestiture experience. You want to make sure your data is clean.
Do you feel that some fleet managers stick with a vendor too long? Do you find that a lot of fleet managers have a difficulty making that change?
I think we are all guilty of that. Let's be honest, changing FMC is not an easy task. If you overstay in that relationship, you create complacency both internally and externally. The cost of not changing can be just as high, if not higher, than the cost of staying.
Jen, welcome to the fleet.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
I'm excited to talk to you because, we, in our conversations here before, there's some interesting points about fleet that we haven't touched on really in the past. So I'm excited to get your input on that. But, as we get started, so Jen, tell me about your role at BD and how you ended up there.
I actually personally came to BD from CareFusion. So I came from one of the acquisitions of BD into the BD family, but through some org structure, they asked me to lead the fleet program, the combined fleet program. So so that's how we ended up here today. But for example, for CareFusion and BART, those are pretty large size integration. So in each of those acquisitions, they had their own program that we had to figure out how to inherit or how to transition over. Usually, when it comes to integration, rule number one is business as usual on day one, because any business, you cannot afford just, sitting out all those drivers the first week because of the integration. So the expectation, no matter what, is you always, day one, business as usual. Don't break the business. Don't make the drivers freak out. So you want to prep these drivers for what's going to happen on day one. Even if there's nothing changing, you want to make sure that your communication is clear, what they should expect on day one, because otherwise it will be chaotic. People will freak out, or people will just send a lot of emails and just create a lot of unnecessary noise. But for CareFusion and BART, with those integrations, we basically tripled the size of the fleet.
Wow.
Edwards was a little bit different. They had a different program we inherited. And with that, we kind of opened up some options for us, which has been a great learning experience too through that acquisition. So we acquired a segment of business from Edwards, so not the entire company. But I think always, no matter what the size is, communication is key, what you communicate to the drivers so that they know what they are expecting. Even if there's no change, you need to tell them there won't be any change.
Yeah. You mentioned that Edwards in particular was a learning experience. Like what was it so much about Edwards that, what did you learn, I guess? I mean, you say you only bought a portion of Edwards. So that makes, tearing those things apart can be really complicated. And also, if you could touch a little bit on sort of what were the expectations, from the business coming at you with all of these integrations? Yeah.
So Edwards didn't have a traditional fleet program where people were in company cars. So they actually had the favor program, the reimbursement program. And that's something that we looked at in the past, but we never implemented. Prior to that acquisition, we had a traditional company car program and also the allowance program, but we didn't have a favor program. So within a short period of time, we had to learn the program and figure out, make decision on how to integrate, make decision on vendor, and then bring them over all within a short period of time. And also a little bit of hiccup. Last minute, we found out payroll had a different transition timeline than our fleet. And because favor program, is reimbursement, and we had to leverage payroll to facilitate those payments. So we had to make a last minute change to move up the go live date. So it was a lot, but it kind of forced us to learn the program. very quick and then make certain vendors decisions very quick. So everything was more is more expedited, but all good at the end. I think that transition went very well. And now that they are part of our family and they have the option to join the free program or stay in the favor program, and drivers are pretty happy. And again, I think the expectation, like I mentioned earlier, is always day one, please don't break the program. Make sure the drivers are comfortable. They know what they're expecting. We know that sometimes there could be some, slight changes on day one, or, whether they get a new fuel card or new materials, whatever that might be. But the one thing that's most important is you want to make sure drivers are clear on what they should expect. And also you want to leverage leaders, to help you cascade the information down, because we all get so many emails and sometimes people might not, read the email that you send to them. But if you target not just the drivers, but also, the leadership team of that population that you are integrating into your program, then you can make sure that, even if the drivers themselves, they miss the email, that the leaders will talk to them, etc. So I think, you just want to make sure everybody is aligned and know what they're expecting on day one.
Yeah. So I want to loop back a little bit to something you said, so you said you guys had tried a reimbursement program, but it didn't work in the past. What was it? And it sounds like you kept some of that reimbursement. You're giving them the option, right? Because you're not, like you said, you don't want to take away something they had before, right? Because once you give somebody something, it's hard to take it away. So what was it about the reimbursement program that didn't work for you guys previously, and how are you making it work this time around?
So we opted not to go with the program at the time when we started looking at, reimbursement type program, because at the time when we were looking at it, actually was at the beginning of the pandemic in 2020. We wanted something that will be a little bit more agile. We can just roll out without a lot of dependencies on vendors and without extensive RFP, etc. Because at the time there were a lot of cars sitting in people's driveway. They were not going anywhere, and people really want to return a car. But to return a car, they are still in driving positions. They still have to drive for the company, and they say, hey, with the little amount of driving that we're doing, I want to do it in my personal car. I don't need your car in my driveway and my car. Right. So we wanted to roll out a reimbursement type program, but we looked at the favor program, and with a lot of moving pieces, and also it involves vendor, we decided at the time that we'll just use a simple car allowance program. So that was a decision made because of the, certain things that we were looking at and trying to do it really fast at the beginning of the pandemic, but giving people an option. So it's not that we didn't think favor program was appropriate. It's just
the timing wasn't right.
Some other dependencies that prompted us to go the other direction at the time. But we learned quite a few things about favor program back then, because we did take a look. But when we found out that, we had to integrate AdWords, then of course, you really do a deep dive in the program, talk to the vendor at the time. And then once we decided that we are going to need to do an RFP on the program itself, then, of course, RFP is generally pretty complicated. So we try to fast track that. But yeah, it's just a short period of time we had to learn the program and then try to make the decision on the vendor, etc. And then eventually transition, because we ended up going with a different vendor than the vendor that AdWords was using. So there was some work around the transition that we had to do.
So what was it about the vendor that you chose that made you choose them?
So are you asking specific to this particular scenario, or just in general?
I guess in general too. I mean, what was it about? I assume there's certain qualities across all your vendors that you're looking for, and this one probably had those qualities as well. So
in general, when we look at a vendor for our free program or mobility program, we want to make sure, number one, their tech stack is strong. This business, we move fast. We are constantly integrating, divesting, changing. And so if we have a vendor that doesn't have very robust technology or roadmap, it's going to make things more challenging. We don't want to, have to merge 10 different Excel reports to get the data that we need, for example, or, if you want to integrate with one of your enterprise systems and the vendor doesn't have that capability, then your hands are tied. So number one, you look at their technology and their roadmap, make sure they are strong. That's our number one criteria. Number two, of course, the pricing needs to be competitive. And then number three, we want to make sure that vendor is strategic. There are many vendors in the market. Everyone can do a lot of these things, and do them pretty well. But you want a vendor that can take you to the next phase, right? Whatever that might be, or help partner with you to accomplish your business objectives versus just doing things ABC every day, every week. No question asked. Or you always have to prompt them to do things. If you ask them, hey, what are the last 5 innovative things you did for your client? Give us some examples. If they couldn't give you good examples or just something very, generic, then maybe that's not a vendor that you need. But for us, technology, pricing, and also whether they are strategic, those are the key criteria that we look at.
Yeah, I keep hearing from fleet leaders, that the tech stack is really important, because I think there's a lot of tech upgrades that everybody's looking to implement, and it's and the best path I think a lot of folks are seeing is via the vendor.
Yeah, for sure. Because I think, everybody is talking about AI. Everybody is jumping on AI wagon, kind of like everybody was trying to jump on the EV wagon a few years ago, but it has to work for you. It has to align with your corporate objectives, right? Because you also don't want to have a vendor where they are here with the technology, with the tech stack. They can do all sorts of things, but your company, not your fault, but the company that you work for, their technology is a little bit behind, and they might not be compatible with the technology that your vendor is using. Then here you are bringing in a vendor that they can do all sorts of things, but you internally, your company might not be ready for it from infrastructure standpoint. So you have to think about all those things. It's not just the best, the one that has the best tech stack out there that might be your candidate. It has to work for you. So I think you need to first understand your own infrastructure and your roadmap and what you're looking for, and then find the company, the vendor that's most compatible with your needs.
As a fleet leader, you're juggling a lot: driver safety, vehicle uptime, cost control. That's where Element Fleet comes in. With industry-leading data, proactive maintenance programs, and risk management solutions, Element helps you keep your fleet moving efficiently and safely. They partner with you to tackle challenges head-on so you can focus on delivering results. Ready to take your fleet performance to the next level? Visit elementfleet.com. You've done a lot of consolidation, it sounds like. What are sort of the day-to-day challenges with like that broader base of vendors?
When you have many vendors that you have to work with, number one, it creates a lot of administrative overhead, right? So you have to deal with more systems, more portals, more invoices, more coordinations. Chances are vendor systems, they don't talk to each other if they're competitors, right? Then you have to, yourself or your team, you guys have to find a way to merge the data, to integrate the data so that, when you roll up to the executive team, it can be something that's more comprehensive, right? They don't want to look at 5 reports from 5 different vendors to try to figure out what is the holistic picture of your program or your performance. And also, I think, if you have many different vendors, it can drive data silos. So then like I said, all the data is sitting, each vendor has their own system. Then you're spending time reconciling the reports instead of working on improving on your efficiencies. And then also, if you have different vendors in the same space, if something doesn't work, you lose sight of the clear accountability, right? So for example, if you're working with 2 or 3 different FMCs and then you try to use one to sell the car or transportation, they pick up the car for you to sell, but the lease is sitting with another vendor. And when something goes wrong with that move, you might end up hearing, people pointing finger to the other, each other, from vendor side standpoint. And then it can slow down, trying to get to the root cause of what the risk solution might be. And also if you have to work with multiple vendors, more systems, that means also more security or compliance exposures that you have to deal with. And then sometimes I feel the disconnected data can create a lot of blind spots for people and resulting in some waste, whether intentional or not, which creates inefficiency. So I think the bottom line is you want to consolidate vendors where it makes sense in order to cut overhead and protect margins. Not everything has to be consolidated. I'm not saying that you want to have one vendor for everything, every category, but where it makes sense, especially in the free space, you sometimes deal with many different vendors beyond the FMC. You want to look at what's best practices. What will be the roadmap that allows you to move to the next phase of your program or help you achieve your business objectives?
Do you feel that like some fleet managers, stick with a vendor too long, and then you start getting a little bit of that vendor sprawl because you're finding point solutions to fill in gaps from the vendor that you're sticking with that hasn't kind of gotten to where you need them to be. Do you find that like a lot of fleet managers have a difficulty making that change?
Yeah, I think we are all guilty of that because let's be honest, especially when it comes to fleet management company, and I'm sure I'm not the first or last one to say that changing FMC is not an easy task. It's pretty painful and it's not quick. It's not like you can just flip the switch, you award the contract and effective January 1st, and you're just going to move to the new vendor. It takes years to fully transition a fleet from one FMC to another. But in general, I think a lot of times we also feel like the pain of changing is almost greater than or equal to the pain that you are feeling right now of, some of whatever issues that you might be facing. So, but at the same time, I'm a firm believer in that, vendor, like any relationship, if you overstay in that relationship that is not working, you can also create some complacency, both internally and externally. Externally, the vendor, if they know that you clearly have no motivation to change, no matter what the performance is, then what will be the motivation for them to solve your problem or prioritize your problem, right? And internally, if you feel that, this is painful, this is not working, but I've been living with this pain for so long, next thing you know, you became complacent with, feeling that pain or experiencing that. And you just almost feel like that's part of that relationship, and it doesn't have to be that way. Also, I feel like, sticking with one vendor too long really create a loyalty penalty, not loyalty bonus that you're expecting. The other side of the equation is loyalty penalty, Next thing you know, your pricing might not be competitive. Issues are not getting solved, as quickly as you expect them to be solved because, sometimes you're just not prioritized when they feel that you're a client that will just stay there with them no matter what. And then also, I think sometimes long-term relationship can also slow down innovation because then, next thing you know, you're outdated. You don't know what's out there. You don't know what you don't know. And maybe there are some other fabulous vendors out there that can solve the problem that you've been trying to solve, but the vendor that you have might not have that capability. But if you don't look outside, you just don't know. So the cost of not changing can be just as high, if not higher than the cost of staying.
Yeah. Well, you kind of hinted at it earlier in some earlier conversation, but I mean, I got to imagine your RFP is kind of interesting when you send it out. Like what kinds of things are you putting in like an RFP to find the right vendor?
You want to make sure that the way you structure the RFP, the way you ask questions, you're comparing apple to apple. Because if you make it very vague, and I'm not saying the vendor will intentionally try to, misrepresent themselves, but if you don't ask the right questions, then maybe the answers that you get might not be what you're actually asking. Or, one vendor can answer one way or another vendor might answer differently. And then you're comparing A and B, but when they are really talking about different things. And also when it comes to FMC, there are some hidden costs, right? You ask for, certain pricing for certain categories, but within all the vendors that each of these FMCs work with, they also have their own pricing structure with them. And there might be some built-in or markup that they are charging that's not represented in what the FMC is charging you, but could be another layer. So you really want to be very careful when it comes to pricing, how you structure your RFP, ask those questions, what you're looking at. Also, the other thing is, we want to, of course, look at the SLA setup. One thing that we don't compromise is, I know a lot of vendors now, they have their boilerplate when it comes to SLA. They give you, hey, this is the template we use for all the clients. We are trying to standardize it. But from my experience, typically those standardized SLA does not meet our needs. It's very generic and it's really written for them to pass. And no offense, but you might have, or at least in our case, we have very specific expectations. So one thing that we always want to see is the vendor is able to work with us to customize the SLA that we are looking for so that we are measuring things that are important to us. The other thing in RFP, I always ask for, and I don't know everybody is doing that, I'm really particular about client reference. When I say client reference, I don't mean, hey, give me your 2 free clients that you're working with right now. I'm actually doing it a little bit more strategically. I like to talk to clients who recently leave you or recently join you from another vendor because
that's interesting.
And I do that with all the vendors that are participating in the RFP because this is a pretty small space that we are working in. So if you do it with every vendor that, submits the RFP, chances are you have a pretty big pool of client references that you talk to. The reason I try to hone in on asking for client references that have gone through that transition, because by talking to them, you can also, number one, talk to clients who recently came from another vendor, and that vendor that they came from, maybe the vendor is the vendor that you're currently with. So you can try to understand what's not working, what has worked well. And also through integration, sometimes the best and the worst comes out, when you're leaving a vendor, how they treat you as an outgoing client. By talking to the clients that have recently gone through the transition versus a client that has been with the company for 20, 30 years, which we have a lot of these clients in FMC space, right? Because like I said, pain of changing. So some clients, they stay with the same vendor for a long time, but I like to talk with clients who have gone through recent transition from one vendor and to another so that you can get the full picture. And also that gives you and some insight of other vendors that you might even not have worked with or programs that you have not learned about. So I think you can learn a lot from talking to other clients and also build that relationship.
Yeah, I mean, it's always good to get industry knowledge from other fleet leaders because that's it really expands your reach into the market and understanding what's going on.
Yeah.
One of the things we were talking about was the idea that it's easier to build fleets oftentimes than it is to divest your fleet, right? And I've been in situations where companies had to roll down, and it's I found that it's just as much work to close a company down as it is to build a company. It's not as fun, and there's less people to help you. Right. So talk about your experience with that. Like what goes into divesting?
Yeah, it's interesting because I think, I've talked to many folks in the industry and folks, everyone tends to focus a little bit more about talking about integration, but very rarely that you hear people talking about that divestiture experience. I think from my experience, right? So we have done a lot of large or small size divestiture over the years. And like you said, my experience, similar to yours, you have less people to help you because people tend to focus more on integration because you want, I mean, these are folks joining your company, programs joining your company. You want to, set the right tone and welcome people, etc. But when it comes to divesting, they just want it done. Leadership just want to know this is the close day and you just have it done. The challenge, just like integration, the challenge is sometimes, between the time of, the announcement when you are looped in, and each company is different, each deal is different. But usually you don't have a long lead time from the time you find out about that divestiture to the time that you actually have to make that happen. The challenge is that there are many variables, just like acquisition. The nature of the transaction or the deal itself and the buyer decision on what they want to do will determine a lot of the challenges or steps that you might have to take or face within this short period of time. And it is not unusual. You will be surprised, or maybe you're not surprised. For the buyer themselves, oftentimes they underestimate the complexity of a free divestiture. They thought, in some cases, we already have a free program. That's easy button, easy press the button and you can just sign over the fee to them. And oftentimes you find out after the fact that, hey, they make certain agreement in the deal, in the purchase agreement, etc. And you just have to find a way to make it work now, no matter what the circumstances are. So you want to make sure, number one, your own data, you cannot control other people's data, right? But your own free data, you need to make sure it's always clean. If you have messy data when it comes to this situation, you already have a very short period of time to work on that. And then you're dealing with messy data. You don't even know which vehicles should be part of that divestiture. That is a problem, right? So, and also depending on how much lead time you have, the nature of the deal, sometimes you might have to do different things within a short period of time to make it happen. Whether that be, short cycling the vehicle, or maybe you need to hold off on ordering the vehicle for this group that will be leaving you, etc. And again, depending on the buyer decision, whether they are going to retain the fee, whether they want to move to a different program. Recently, we are working through a very interesting scenario where, that's why I said I'm still learning. Believe it or not, this company that we are divesting the fleet to, they also have a free program. They have the same FMC, So I thought, when I heard about that, I thought, thank goodness.
Be easy, right?
This should be easy peasy. No, it's not easy because even when it comes to the same FMC, you still have to transfer the leases. And with specifically with this divestiture, they decided that, they want to leverage a TSA for us to continue to support it. So there are some complexities to have those kind of things set up. And then when it comes to even moving it to the same FMC, you still have to do the retitling and re-registration of those vehicles. And that in itself is a beast. So there's a lot that goes into divestiture, but nobody talks enough about it. And things can get very complicated very fast.
Yeah. Well, and I found in those types of situations, leadership has a tendency to hold that information very close to the vest until the very last minute. And so you don't get an opportunity to do due diligence in all of that before it happens. I mean, do you have any strategies or suggestions for maybe leadership or fleet managers in how to work better with management to get that information earlier and make that a more seamless transition?
Yeah, I think three things that I can think of. Number one, you want to build that relationship with your corporate team. If you are working for a mid-size or large-size organization, they will have typically a dedicated team of lawyers or folks that work on M&A. You definitely want to make sure they know that you exist, what your role is, what your expertise is, so that if they need to come to you, have you sign an NDA so that, they can talk to you about certain potential scenarios or information they're looking at. They need to know that you exist and who you are, right? Build that relationship. And number two, I think you want to make sure, like I said earlier, you want to make sure your data is clean. I think the driver and the inventory data, you want to keep it as clean as possible and current so that, Otherwise, when you need to pull the inventory list within a short period of time, if your data is messy, it's just a lot of work to try to clean it up before you can even get it to the folks who requested it, right? The other thing that I would suggest people to do is, for myself, I have a handful of project plans based on the nature of the deal, right? Whether incoming or outgoing, whether they are already in the free program, whether they want to, whether they're coming from reimbursement type program and vice versa, so that I can customize it, pull it out, and go through all the steps and build it a timeline. I like to have those ready just so that I can see from the once we have the timing, we have to deal with us. I can plug the information in and see, hey, right off the bat, I can see that we are going to be behind, and you want to flag those risks right away to corporate. And also, when you have those things, if you have to do things in a hurry, then you're not missing steps, because sometimes there's so many departments involved. And so you have to do so much within a short period of time. If you're just trying to have to build it from scratch when you actually need to work on it, then it's difficult. So, but for those folks who have never done it before, how do you start? You want to do your research, have some basic understanding of M&A, different types of deals. Talk to your peer fleet managers, who have experience with that. They can help you, give you some tips. And then talk to your FMC partner. They have gone through many of those. They can also help you. It doesn't have to be done while you are already working on it, right? You can build some foundation to help yourself get ready when those things knock on your door.
You apparently hit 95% driver satisfaction post-integration. What goes into keeping them happy?
So I've been in the industry long enough to know that we can never make everyone happy. So
well, the 5%
no matter
at least.
what you do, right? So, but
right.
what we try to do is balance, what's the right thing for the company, balance cost and driver experience and productivity, right? Because I'm still trying to find my sweet spot right now, even today, but you cannot, so knowing that you cannot please everyone, but you also want to make sure the drivers feel they are heard. Even if you truly can take the feedback and implement it, some people might ask for things that are just not going to be feasible in your fleet. But you want to make sure that they feel they have a voice in this, and you are not building the program in silos. So make sure you have a way to get the feedback. And also for things that you can incorporate, if you hear from voice of your drivers and you can implement something low hanging fruit, etc., do that. One example, I think years ago, before I came into this company, they used to limit driver pay options back in the days. And as a driver, when you order your new vehicle, you can only choose from a very small range of options or packages from the OEMs. We opened that up. Those are the low-hanging fruit that I mentioned, right? If you can make drivers happy by opening something up that they pay for with certain parameters, why not? Also, you want to make sure that sometimes when it comes to driver satisfaction or dissatisfaction, there's noise, but there's also legitimate concern, right? You want to understand those. So you want to make sure you survey your drivers periodically. You can, for those that work with FMC, again, I'm probably going to stand out as one of those pain in the, what kind of client. I don't like to do standard survey that they have. We always customize the survey that we have them send out to our drivers, because there are certain pains or things that we think is important for us to know or learn more about, that the standard survey might not meet your needs. So you need to be able to get to those things versus just sending out standard survey with those standard questions that can get you an overview, but you might not be able to get to the double click level of details, right? So I think surveying your drivers to understand their sentiment, but at the same time, beyond the driver satisfaction, you are still running a corporate fleet after all. You're not trying to run a fleet that meets every driver's need and make them happy and put the corporate initiative on the back burner. So you need to make sure you balance those. And I think Also communication, we have regular communication through newsletter and other channels that we reach out to our drivers. If a lot of people are asking for something through the survey, you cannot entertain those needs. You need to help people understand the whys, because if you just ignore them, it just becomes a noise and distraction. Until they understand why, they will not stop asking and complaining. So I think, again, being transparent, but at the same time, you try your best to balance your cost and driver's experience and productivity. That's a healthy relationship that you're trying to build there.
Well, I'd be curious, based on that, like what kind of survey questions do you feel are like missing from the standard ones that you always like to ask?
So for our FMC, because we are not right now, we have looked at the electrification. A few years ago, we spent a couple of years looking at a lot of data, cost, etc. We make a decision to not move to that direction right now, just like many companies in our space.
Yeah.
Infrastructure and cost is just not viable right now, feasible for our drivers to move into those programs. But at the same time, as part of that overall direction, right, eventually we know that as a society, as a country, we'll get there someday. But we want to understand our driver sentiment, or from infrastructure standpoint, whether they are ready. But because the FMC standard driver survey does not have any question about EV, we want to make sure that we can build in certain questions so that we understand how drivers feel about it, how much they really know about electrification, because some people, they don't understand the difference between plug-in hybrid and EV, right? So you want to ask them questions to understand how much they know or not know. For those that feel like they are not ready, why? What's the biggest pain point or concern about moving to EV? So that as you start moving to that direction, getting your feet ready down the road, you know what you're facing, you know why, what are the challenges or hurdles that you'll have to overcome. And then also for us, for example, a few years ago, we were having a lot of pain points and challenges with the transportation vendor. We end up switching our preferred vendor through our FMC. And around that time, we wanted to gauge, hey, are we seeing an improvement with the service? So the standard survey did not go into those type of details with transportation. So we added 1 or 2 questions around that. So it's really, we want to make sure the survey, we do it once a year from our end. We want to make sure the survey meets the needs and get us the data that we feel that's most important for us, based on the challenges or things that we are seeing or things that we want to implement. That's why customization is key to us, because otherwise, if we are just getting generic survey out, then that's good, but it's still not getting us the answer that we are looking for. And what better way to do that through the annual survey that they are going to send out anyway.
If your organization depends on a fleet of vehicles, it's time to think about your fleet as a strategic asset. Element delivers end-to-end solutions that reduce costs, improve productivity, and support sustainability goals. From vehicle acquisition to electrification and everything in between, Element's data-driven approach helps organizations optimize performance and keep their drivers safe and supported on the road. To learn more about how Element can move your fleet forward, visit elementfleet.com. I want to switch gears a little bit, because I'm sure, like, because we talked about divestiture and things like that. And, there's sort of like the end of the relationship with the employee too. Right. And I'm sure you have some really, weird and funny stories about trying to get vehicles back. That's something we don't talk about a lot, is sort of like, those kinds of challenges. Can you relate any interesting stories about that?
Yeah. Well, funny you should ask. Within my team, we always joke about someday when we retire, we are going to collectively write a book about all those stories that we accumulated over the years in this industry, in this space. But one story is that I can share, of course, no name. I don't want to get in trouble. So we had a driver
skip the names.
Left the company, and we send the order out to our FMC to try to get the car back. But I'm sure many fleet managers have faced this challenge before. The driver was not responsive, and despite our multiple attempts, etc., we couldn't get a response. Now, Interesting enough, that driver happened to live in the same city that our fleet team is in. So we had that luxury to be able to try to do drive-by on our own to see what's going on. Do you see the car? We did all that. We can see the car there, but that person is not responding. We tried many different things. We worked with HR legal eventually, and unfortunately, and I haven't had a chance to give kudos to my team. I have a great team that I had the pleasure to work with, and with someone on my team, they had this idea, oh, let me try to search. Initially, he tried to search for the phone number of this driver to see if there's other alternative contact information, because the one we have, we couldn't get a response. Eventually, somehow they were able to connect through social media with that person's parents. This driver is not a 16-year-old. I'm talking about this driver is in their mid-40s. We were able to connect with the parents, and apparently this driver didn't even tell the parents that he is no longer with this company. So that was a whole different thing when the parent found out from us that that person is no longer with us. But through that conversation with the parents' help, and this sounds so silly but interesting at the same time, we were finally able to get the car back through the parents, really. I always thought
how long did it take to get it back to the parents?
But yeah, those are some of the things that we go above and beyond to try to get the car back. But this one will always stick with me.
Yeah, but I mean, when the parents got involved, did he turn it in right away?
We got a call right away within 24 hours. The parents told us, don't worry, you will hear from my son in 24 hours. And that happened.
Yeah, the parents still have a lot of sway in that, right?
Thank goodness in that case, at least. But yeah, you kind of see the best and worst of human behavior in this space. Oftentimes, you deal with the business side of things, but oftentimes you also have to deal with the humanity side of things, human behaviors and what people do or don't do. So you definitely want to have very good partnership with your HR and legal team. Make sure when you build policy, lesson learned. Each time we have one of those funny story aside, we always say, hey, is there anything different or better that we need to do next time when we revise our policy? Because we try to update our policy on an annual basis to make sure they're current and we can capture any gaps or things that have changed in our industry or in our space that might require us to kind of change certain language or build in or take things away, etc. So it's always interesting to hear those stories.
Is your policy now that you have to have the parents' phone number when you give people a vehicle?
Hey, that's a great idea. Haven't thought about that.
So like, what kinds of things, like, there's a lot to think about here in terms of like policy and all that. But I mean, like, what do you think that like fleet, if you were talking to, like other fleet managers, what do you see that they, kind of obsess over, or, things that just, don't matter probably, but they're still so deeply focused and spend so much time on that it's like, let that go kind of stuff?
Yeah, I think a lot of folks are really obsessed about the MPG of certain make and model. And yes, MPG obviously is very important because fuel expenses, one of the top three categories of any fleet program, right? So it is not that it's not important, but if one car is, let's say 28 MPG versus another one is 29 or 27, that in itself shouldn't be the only reason why you pick that car, because the reality is between what's publicized by the OEM, what's in reality, and how the drivers use the car, right? Whether they do more highway driving, city driving, there are a lot of variables and factors that go into determining what the MPG will look like once the car is in your fleet. So don't let those one or two, MPG, don't break your head on that and don't spend too much time on that. I think, you look at it with a grain of salt. You still want to make sure directionally you are picking vehicles that are fuel efficient, but don't worry too much about, oh, you said it's 28, but in reality it's 26. Why is that? Well, there are many factors that go into it. And then things that I think is very important, but sometimes I think, not everyone is paying enough focus on that is utilization and the TCO. I think TCO, if you have been in the industry for a while, you will understand that. But a lot of people still look at more on the upfront acquisition cost and versus the total operating cost, because a vehicle might be more expensive upfront. Maybe the OEM or the manufacturer will offer you better incentives, but if it costs more over the life cycle of your vehicle to maintain it because of the repair costs or whether it's reliable or not, etc., you're going to end up, spending more. So you want to make sure you look at your TCO and also utilization. There's only so much you can do to downsize a vehicle that you have with the driver, because ultimately they need to have a large enough car to carry their trunk stock or whatever cargo they have to carry. But you want to make sure if you have a car on the road, they are utilized. And if a vehicle is not utilized, then you need to bring that forefront and to the leaders or to your leadership team to say, hey, these vehicles are not being utilized. Maybe we have some opportunities there. Or it can be also mean that maybe they are not where the driver might not be where they should be at. That's why the vehicle is sitting around so much. So make sure you look at your TCO and utilization.
I mean, it sounds like, kind of what you're saying is don't over optimize and like get hung up on sort of the fuel costs when like driver behavior is going to influence your TCO significantly more. I mean, is that something you focus on a lot, is sort of driver behavior and sort of like analyzing that?
Yeah, I think I would love to be able to hone in a little more on that. We don't have telematics right now in our fleet for varieties of reasons. But in absence of that, we look at different, reports to measure compliance, whether someone is doing the oil change, whether someone is reporting the mileage, what they are doing, with, the rental that they are in. Are they overstaying the rental? Funny enough, I don't know if this is just our field or what, but people who have had their vehicle for a while, sometimes they like the rental car and they like it enough that, for example, if they have a car in the shop and when the car is ready, they might still want to stay in the rental car because the rental car is newer or whatever that might be. So you really want to look at your compliance, whatever technologies you use, whether that be through telematics, etc., or just through traditional reports, you need to measure, make sure your drivers are doing what they are supposed to do. And more importantly, if they are not, you need to have a plan, a path to address those. Because, for example, you want people to do oil change, right? If they don't do it, the manufacturer and also the OEM will send reminder. The car will have something on the dashboard. The manufacturer, the FMC typically will send reminders to help you monitor those. But if despite all those efforts, they are not doing the oil change, then you're going to need to do something. You need to have a plan. If someone doesn't do what they're supposed to do, what is your escalation plan to address those? Because if it's just email after email reminder and they're still not doing it and you send them 10 more emails, that's not going to get you anywhere. So you need to have those full plan built out so that you can address those issues more efficiently.
So, shifting gears a little bit here again, there's a lot going on in the industry. I mean, you talked about electrification, there's automation and things like that. I mean, and I know I've heard, like everybody in fleet talk about, oh, well, AI is coming in and, obviously AI is going to be a big part of everything, in the future too. But I mean, like what sort of trends are you seeing that like you feel are going to be really relevant to fleet right now?
I think, aside from everybody talking about AI, I think mobility solution. I think oftentimes we talk a lot about the traditional free program, but more and more companies now, they want to look at what's your total holistic mobility solution for your field-based employees, because not everyone needs a company car, depending on where they're going, what's their travel pattern. A company car might not be the best solution for them, or maybe they live in New York City Having a company car means that you are paying, $1,500 or more, just in parking itself, right? And when the employee themselves, maybe they are taking transit to many places for their day-to-day customer visit. So you really want to look at your total mobility solution and make sure that you have the right solution for the driver population that you're working with. And I think that is really the trend that a lot of organizations are starting to look at versus just looking at, company car, what's the right car, electrification, AI, etc. I think there's a broader solution that you need to look at.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I mean, because there are a lot of ranges, like everything from, PEVs, personal electric vehicles and things like that, to public transportation, rideshare, all that sort of thing. I mean, we talked about complexity and lots of vendors. I mean, and now in that kind of space, there's a lot of complexity, right? I mean, like, are you reimbursing people for rideshare? Are you, reimbursing them for public transportation even? Or are you like, how do you manage that without introducing a lot of complexity?
So I think you want to identify the right population that you want to look at that might potentially be eligible for something other than company car. Then you want to build a relationship with the teams that can help you look at those type of data. So for me, for example, I have very close partnership with our travel and expense team that, we can pull data, not just look at sometimes, our company car drivers might expense certain things that they should really not be expensing. Maybe they should really be doing it through the FMC, vendor, etc. So there's some leakage there. But beyond that, the people who don't have a car, maybe some of them should be in a car. You look at the mileage, you look at the rental car data, you look at the travel data broader than beyond what your FMC is sharing, so that you look at you have a more holistic view of really the travel data, right? That's available to you. And then you try to look at that and then segment your population. Hey, this group not driving enough for company car, but drive on a very regular basis. Should they just continue to do mileage? Should we put them in favor? Should they be given a car allowance or whatever program might be that works better for you? And where you capture the data, because each program, right, depending on what type of program, the mileage details that you're getting will be a little different. Car allowance program, typically, you don't require people to actually report a lot of details, so you might not have all the details around where they're going, how often they are going to those places, their daily travel, etc. Versus favorite program is more detailed because it's binded by the IRS guidelines. So you really want to look at data beyond just what your FMC or your free program is, make beyond the data available to you from your traditional free program. Yeah, so that's what my advice would be. It's a lot. They don't talk to each other clearly, so you do want to make sure that you have some ability to merge the data. I have the luxury to have someone who is really good in Excel, and then they also leverage some, power apps like Power Automate, Power Inquiry, then can help us merge the data a little more quickly. So, but yeah, you just need to know what you're looking at, where the data is sitting at, and then try to make sense of it.
If you had like one piece of advice to give people right now, like what's the 30-second, here's what you should focus on kind of thing?
I would say right now you want to make sure that you know where you stand with your vendor. Yeah. And know that if you have challenges with your current vendor, as painful as it might be, I can tell you from my experience that not changing or not knowing what's out there in the market is going to hurt you in the long term. Are you going to be okay to live with this pain that you're feeling right now in the next 10 years or however long you're planning to stay in the industry, knowing that there might be something better that can give you some relief, out in the market? You don't know what you don't know. And also, keep up with the industry, don't just work in your program in silos. There are so many great resources, great people out there in the industry that can help you. So Go to conferences if you can, talk to other people, connection. There are many people out there that can help you, open your eyes into what's available out in the market, and also learn, everybody has their own journey in this industry, but I think we can all take, some lesson learned from everybody else's journey to not just our own. So that would be my advice.
That's great. That's good advice. That's good advice. Well, Jen, thank you so much for being on. It was really interesting to hear your perspective and to talk about divestitures for a change. That's one thing I don't think we've talked about here. So, but thank you so much for being on. Really appreciate it. And if people want to connect with you, what's the best way to do that?
Don't connect with me. I'm too busy. I'm just kidding. No, you can find me on LinkedIn. So just connect with me through LinkedIn. I don't check my LinkedIn every day, but I do respond. I do check my LinkedIn from time to time, but yeah. Or if you go to industry conferences, etc., you'll see me there too. But yeah, but LinkedIn will be the first place.
And just for people who are looking for you, VrMeer is spelled VrMeer because. What was your line on that?
Because if you can just use 6 letters instead of 7, make things faster, why not? We are always talking about efficiency.
Man, that is efficient. That is the peak of efficiency.
There you go.
All right. Thank you so much, Jen. I appreciate it.
You're welcome. Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.